Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Event Pro Show. I am your host, Seth Mackey. I'm the CEO of LEMG. We're an event production company in Charlotte, North Carolina. We travel all over the U.S. producing primarily corporate events. And as you know, this podcast introduces you to people of all sorts of talents that touch in some way corporate events or large format events. And Ian, I'm going to just go ahead and read your bio here as a way of introduction. I'm super excited about Ian joining the show. Today's guest, Ian Morrison, is CEO and co-founder of the Imagination Collaborative, an Australian studio building photorealistic digital twins and pre-visualization tools for major outdoor events, venues, and stadiums. He also founded Behind the Stage, an online event leadership training program and community that teaches event professionals how to plan, lead, and deliver with better systems and less burnout, which we all could use. With over 35 years in the events industry, Ian has led large-scale outdoor concerts, festivals, touring shows, and public events across 4 continents. His operating principle is safe first, then smart, then shiny. I love that. Ian Morrison, welcome to the show.
Seth, thanks for having me on. It's great.
It's wonderful. I'm excited. I've been following along, like we were chatting before we started here. I've been following along with content that you post on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of content floating around the world, but you're one of those voices that cuts through with the weight of someone that knows what they're talking about, which you would think wouldn't be as rare as it is.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you for getting up early and joining us on the show. But how did you get your start in events? I'm just going to start there.
Yeah, well, I started really early at high school. In fact, it started at primary school. We were doing the school play, and I think it was unanimously decided by everybody that I probably shouldn't be on the stage. So I was relegated to backstage and helping with the props and the scenery. So, and I loved it. I found this real passion for it. And when I went into senior school, I had to choose 3 electives, and stage crew was one of them, and I had such great experience at the school play. I thought, why not? Let's give that a go. And I never left. And I found the kids that were older than me were already working in the industry, and I started doing some casual gigs, pushing road cases and follow spot ops, that sort of thing, to earn a bit of money on the side, and really loved it. And I've never left. Yeah, I've always, since then, been involved with the industry. We did some pretty crazy things in the school theatre, big school dances and productions. I remember one time we were cutting holes in the auditorium roof to get to more rigging beams. None of us were a rigger. None of us had any idea about safety. We were just really, really lucky. Nothing happened.
But how did you get permission for that?
I have no idea. I remember we sort of were showing our teachers these big sort of lighting plans, and we're like, come on, we'll just get to these beams and we can hang some more lights. And we were doing these amazing truss creations in the roof with hundreds of park hands, and yeah, I had no idea how the school let us get away with it, but yeah, sure enough, we did. And
I love it.
You know, looking back now, very, very lucky. Nothing fell out of that roof.
Right. Yeah, but such a great story.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? I mean, it takes a special kind of person to say, I am going to break away from someone else's system and create my own. You know, that takes a lot of confidence. Did you always think that way growing up?
Interestingly enough, I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur, but even in school, we had our own production company as we were sort of getting older. We were doing all the other schools' plays and dances and productions, and I got sort of thrown into entrepreneurship when I was made redundant in 2001. The company I worked for at the time had a huge client base in the Twin Towers, and also Australia's biggest airline, or second biggest airline at the time, Ansett, which collapsed around that time, with their largest client. And we went from this huge company of 80 odd people in early September to 12 people left in December. And I remember just sitting there a couple of weeks before Christmas with a young family going, this is crazy. This is my life. I've just been made redundant because something right across the world happened that I had no control over. Maybe I'll go and just do this business stuff myself. And I ran that business for over 21 years. And for me, it was more about my lifestyle and being in control of my future than it really was about building a business and being an entrepreneur. And we did great gigs, and I had great people around me and working for me, and really enjoyed it. So, yeah, and it's only recently when I sort of have had a spate of I sold that business in 2000. We did a deal just before COVID and signed the paperwork in December of 2020. And then I stayed for 18 months. I didn't really my values didn't align with the people that bought the business. So I went out and started another company, Raging Empire. And then quickly after that, the Imagination Collaborative, and soon after that, Behind the Stage. So it's been just this quick spate. So yeah, now I feel a bit like an entrepreneur.
You totally are, but you approached it like lifestyle first, and in the early days, and then you just kept going with it and kept going with it. I think that's an amazing story of just being your own business person, but for different reasons. You know, there can be different motivations. And I definitely remember I lost my first job in production in 2001. Same thing. It's amazing how that impacted the world at the time, but kind of pushed people in different directions. That was how I jumped out into freelance work. I stopped working for somebody and went freelance at that point. So I think a lot of people were making big life decisions they didn't even mean to, at the time.
And it's just amazing the way world events like that can have such an impact on people.
Absolutely. So you, right now you're working a lot in design, and you have, but your company focuses on design. But in your experience outside of your company, just in a typical historical sense, what has been the typical usage for CAD software and renders pre-event from like planner perspectives? How have you seen them used and maybe even underutilized in the planning process?
I think a lot of people still to this day rely on 2D plans. I mean, it is developing more into the 3D space, but to be really blunt, our industry has been very slow on adoption of real 3D planning processes. I know still for the majority of events I'm involved with nowadays, they're still all 2D. There's no consideration of the 3D environment. And the renders are very static. So they generally are from the best seats in the house, and they're the best look. So I know when somebody asks us to do renders, we render the best vision. Like we will render, if we want to give them 12 renders, we'll render 20 and we'll pick the best 12 because we want them to look good. We want them to be happy with it. And that's really the way most people work is you take the best. But the reality is, and I liken this to theatre. When I worked in theatre many years ago, we had the production desks for the rehearsals, and the director and the production manager and the lighting designer and everyone would sit at the choreographer. They would sit at the production desk, and the production desk was always in the center of front of the auditorium where the most expensive seats were on sale.
A few rows back, but perfect.
Yep, few rows back, in those perfect sight lines. And very few of those people that sat at the production desk would actually get up and walk around the whole auditorium and see what the view was like from every seat. So it's still to this day exactly the same with digital technology, is people tend to render or visualize from the best seats in the house or the best view, and they don't look at what the people who are paying the cheapest seats are getting, because that's not their main focus.
I think people, to your point, people stop at using it as a sales tool to get the contract, but you can go so much deeper with designs and how you're planning the production. So on that note, how have you, with the Imagination Collaborative, challenged that status quo when it comes to event planning and design? How did you, because I imagine you're sitting there looking and, okay, it's like a 2D world and you're only looking at the best seats. We can do better than this. So how are you kind of challenging that perception of design and how it's used?
Yeah, we have looked at it and gone, well, the days and the technology has moved so far from just static renders, and it was sort of inspired a lot by video game technology, where you can walk around a space and look at it from any angle. And that's really where we've taken the journey now, is into these 3D models that are completely navigable and you can walk around an entire space and on your own and look at it from any angle and understand what that will look like and how the event will interact with the space in its totality. So yeah, it's been a real sort of, dare I use it, game changer for a lot of people that we've worked with.
Yeah, I would, anybody go to the Imagination Collaborative online, and the main video that you have, just your main video on the main page, the walkthrough, it pitches the concept really well, but there's very few times that I watch something like that I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But that was definitely one of those, because tell me if I'm understanding it correctly. You can walk through the entire venue. You can walk a path through the venue. You can see it in different times of day, different weather, and from every seat in the house, just like you were saying. And it clearly shows that in that video. You did a really good job on that, just on the sales side of it.
That's good.
And and it is amazing. It is something that I wish could be every single project that we work on, that we have that ability. But you mentioned a concept that I think I get now that watching that video, but you talk about a digital twin, this concept of a digital twin. What is a digital twin?
So digital twin is a virtual replica of a real life scenario, environment, object. So a great way of explaining this is a jet engine on an aeroplane has thousands of parts and components to it, and engineers create digital twins of aeroplane engines, and they can understand the wear and tear, the mileage. They can look at that engine at any point in the plane's flight and see exactly what's going on within that engine. They don't need to bring it into the hangar and pull it apart anymore. The digital twin is a real life replica. And we've started doing that for events. So we essentially create real life replicas of the event. So, take Live Golf as an example, who we've worked with for a few years. We will scan the golf course in 3D with a high resolution drone using LiDAR and photogrammetry. We'll take that into our CAD models. We'll model all the hospitality overlays. So we can show you exactly what the view down the fairway will look like from the broadcast camera. But not only that, we can show you different camera options, different lenses, different heights for the tower. We can do all of that without you leaving the office. And we're essentially saying you can't do that on a site visit. There's no way you can physically do that for 18 holes on a site visit with every camera. We can take your corporate suite attendees and put them inside the suite and show them exactly what that suite will look like. We can show them what their signage will look like on event day over the main hospitality suite.
I can't help myself from smiling right now because it's such an amazing tool. So digital twin is actually an engineering term that you guys have taken and implemented that concept within your software though. So it's basically the idea that you can visualize something without actually being there in every single angle and in every scenario is amazing. But my next question is, how can pre-event visualization solve problems during the ideation and pre-production phases? And you were touching on that when in your description there.
Yeah, so I mean, the tools that we can deliver through a digital twin are incredible, and even just in a 3D model visualization nowadays. But example, we can program all the lighting, the pyrotechnics, the AV. We've done for clients choreography. We've shown them exactly what the dance routine will look like in a stadium show with hundreds and hundreds of cast members. We can show sponsors what the signage will look like. We can really problem solve many different options. So if you're unsure of a stage position or how the broadcast will look on camera, we can show you that exactly in a virtual environment, months, years ahead of the event itself. And we can work through and really challenge those problems at a granular level.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So on all the challenges that you kind of see in the old days, once you got on site, started loading in, you're like, oh, we didn't look at it from this angle. So we didn't see that this affects the sight line. And then, oh, there's that pick point there is actually a problem. And you're already working through all that. And then from something that might be important, I'm heavily involved with an association right now. So we're always looking at sponsorship opportunities and those type of things. But how is visualization used to drive more revenue at events? So you can use it as a tool for driving revenue. How have you seen that used?
Yeah, so I mean, and you brought up a good point. Sightlines was a huge one. Having done thousands of stadium shows, that the sightline problems that you get once you put a show in, and going from that 2D environment to a 3D environment, or the 2D planning environment to a 3D environment, where you've got multiple levels of a stadium, delay towers, speaker hangs, production holds, all of that. We would spend hours, probably days, of a load-in walking around all the different seats in a stadium, sitting down going, can we sell this seat? Can we sell this seat? It's the week of the show, right? We're 2-3 days out from the show. And now all of a sudden we're releasing 100, 1,000 seats for sale that may not be sold depending on the show. You wouldn't always, you'd put these seats that were held because you didn't know whether they were good seats or not. They'd be held off sale. Now we're putting them on sale, and guess what? They're not selling because it's too soon before the show. Sure, if you've got a Taylor Swift or Harry Styles, they're going to sell, but not every show will do that. Here we can show you those seats and we can be selling them months out, because we know as long as your production team don't move the delay tower positions, that we can show you exactly what the sight lines are from the tier. And so that revenue stream that's coming in, better signage and sponsorship opportunities, being able to emotionally build with sponsors in that lead up while you're selling. Here's what your signage is going to look like in 3D. This is what it'll look like from every seat in the house. They love it. That converts, being able to understand how much scaffolding you're saving, because the undulating ground just makes it too hard to estimate in any other format. Having those 3D scans and that 3D build environment, we're a lot more accurate. We can be so the savings and the revenue come from a number of different and varying fronts.
And I would imagine that your stakeholders are happier once they get on site because you didn't overpromise something. You're literally showing them this is what it'll look like, and it is what it will look like. It's not a guess. It's actually what it's going to look like.
And that's been a mantra of mine for years. Ask anybody that's worked with me: under promise, over deliver. It's just I've been sold the world and delivered an atlas so many times in my career that. I know it's so disappointing, right? When you have this huge expectation in your head and you walk on site and it's like, that is not what I was thinking, and
Right.
for me, that's so many times I think my clients have had that experience too of, you're trying to sell them something realistic, but it's really hard to explain. And this is exactly that. You sign off on it in the months before the show. They know what they're getting. They're excited about it, and they walk on site and see it exactly as it was. As long as the production and the creative and everybody's come through with what we've put together, then we're in a great place.
I love it. I love it. So you've sold me on this, but like if a planner or a producer is beginning to develop larger events and they've never jumped into like the fully rendered 3D designs, what are the first things they should be thinking about when they're like, okay, I'm ready to talk to Ian? So how would they prepare for that? What does that look like as you're moving from like a 2D world into the world that you're delivering?
I think the first thing you got to think about is, what is the problem you're solving? Why are you investing in the 3D design process? Because without that clarity, we can create amazing worlds and models and things like that. But it really helps to know what your goals and objectives are, what the problem or the solution you're looking for is, whether it's more revenue, savings, better stakeholder engagement, broadcast opportunities. What is the primary driver for that engagement or of wanting to go down that path? And then once we've done that, we can really sort of look at what other benefits there are that we can help with along the way.
I love it. When do you think a planner should begin working with a designer like yourself when planning a new concept?
As soon as possible. And I say that because a lot of people come to us weeks or a month out from the event, and nearly everything's locked in, right? It's you're doing this amazing work, but there's not a lot that can be changed. Maybe tickets have been sold, people have been engaged, surveys have been done. So it's too late to make effective change through the modelling process. If you do it as soon as possible, as soon as you really start ideating, then we can work with you. And we generally work in 2D first, and then we go through the 3D process once we're all fairly comfortable with where we've got to 2D. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, and we, in some instances, we'll go straight to 3D and start moving that world around. But generally, we'll start in a 2D process.
And what does this look like? Is it a video somebody gets? Is it a piece of software that people go into and can interact with, more like a gaming environment? Or what does it look like to your clients when you develop
it looks like
model?
Think of Google Street View. It looks like Google. Well, it navigates like Google Street View. It looks like a video game. So, we did start out in the early days with video game style navigation. What we were finding was that our clients are people who have no idea of how to move around a video game. So they're CEOs or designers or, and me, I was there going, WAS what? Move that. How do you, and I'm like, this is no good. So we've gone to a much more Google Street View type click and drag navigation, but it looks like a video game world that you're moving around, but it's your event. And you can measure, you can make notes, you can, as you said, change the time of day, the weather. You can have it rainy or foggy or cloudy. You can, and it's all set to the location of the event. If the event's outdoors, if it's indoors, then you don't need to worry about the weather. So, if you want to change signage or furniture, there's all those options in the menus as well. So you can do all of that, but it's delivered in a web browser. So you don't need any special software. You don't need any. If you can use Google Maps, you're good to go.
Pretty intuitive interface.
Yeah.
So producing an event is expensive, like we've talked about. How can planners save budget money and add value to attendees through advanced design services like what you offer? I think you've touched on that a little bit, but how is this saving? I think people might initially think, oh, I can't afford that type of design service, but I would say, hold on. What problems are you actually solving way before it happens? Because I believe, like, the earlier in any process you catch a problem, the cheaper it is to fix. The closer it gets to the final product, it gets more and more expensive to fix. So how would you argue with that? How can you save money using your services?
I think this is one of the first conversations we have with a client. And the first conversation goes like, okay, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And what is the revenue stream that is going to make this efficient for you? And so are we looking at increasing your income somehow? Are we looking at saving? Are we looking at both? And we did a job for a client a little while back where they went into a big top circus tent, right? Mm-hmm. And they'd never worked in a circus tent before. They were trying to fit about 8,000 seats inside this tent. And they were really, really concerned about sightlines for the show because it was very important that every seat had a good view of the stage. But in a circus tent, you've got all the king poles, so it makes it incredibly hard to know what a good seat and what a not so good seat is. So we built that environment in 3D, and we were able to show them, again, every seat view and what was going to be the king pole. But what came out of this process was that the stage was too low. And the stage being too low, nobody had thought of. We all, even I thought, I've over 35 years in the industry, I've got a pretty good idea of how to set a stage height. But I was surprised, and we ended up lifting the stage a couple of 2 feet, let's call it. It was to make that change on site once you'd built everything and realised that stage was 2 feet too low. That's a huge cost, right? That nobody had thought of at the start of the process. The process had all started by, we want to be able to get the best sight lines. We want to, obviously, revenue's a big thing. So we want to make sure the seats we're selling at a premium aren't going to be blocked and we'll have to give refunds. That was the brief. But at the end of the day, the big game changer came back because we had to lift that stage significantly.
Which actually increased the experience for everyone in the entire room.
Correct.
Amazing.
Correct.
Amazing. Yeah. And saving all that labor bill if you could solve it at all at that point in time.
If you had the gear to solve it. And this was a big touring show. It would have been the first show was not in a major city, so they would have been trucking that additional gear for a 2-foot lift, and it was a big stage.
Paid for itself right there. That's a great example of superior design on the front end, helping you game out challenges on site that are expensive. That's a big one. I wish we had your services on every event that we've ever done. So
be happy to help, Seth.
We'll be talking later. So in your experience, what are some common mistakes that planners make when it comes to event design in general? Just like a general sense.
I think we've touched on a lot of them through the conversation, but I think not planning from every angle is one of the biggest ones. I go to so many shows and sort of, I'm the first person to walk around all the seats and I'm like, wow, there's some really bad sight lines here that people don't consider that experience from every seat in the house. I think a lot of people sort of don't understand 2D plans. I think designers present 2D plans thinking clients can understand that 2D environment. The reality is people have terrible imaginations when it comes to translating a two-dimensional plan into a three-dimensional space. And that has led to so many conversations through my career of people going, clients and people going, I just didn't think it would look like that. It's like, yeah, I get it. You just don't understand that 2D environment. People don't think about build sequences. They don't think about they think about the patron experience as well from a viewing the show perspective. Okay, what is the patron's view experience when I'm watching the performance? What they don't think about is what's the patron's experience from when they leave home or when they book the ticket. What that public transport experience, what we call the last mile as they come to the venue, the entry experience, how crowded is it? How easy is it for them to navigate? How much labour from the patron is required to navigate around the venue? Is it easy to navigate with signage? Is it accessible? Is it neurodiverse? It's all those things that come into play nowadays. And I don't think yet enough designers are thinking about that totality of experience, that by the time the patron gets to the front of the stage to watch the event, that's only a small part. And if that patron has had a bad experience from the minute they purchased a ticket to the minute they got to that point, it's highly unlikely they're going to have the best experience of the show, no matter how much heart and soul you have put into it. So, that's the thing we're really focused on, is being able to fully navigate those experiences ahead of time and understand what all those different touch points will be like. Is the signage good enough? Is that entry experience flowing? Do you have enough gate width? Do you have enough ticket takers or ushers or whatever that experience might be?
This is great. And you're allowing people to do all of these things. So basically your advice is get out of the main room and walk the path that your patrons are going to walk. And you allow them to do that. You do that with this digital twin environment where you can kind of model what that experience would be like. And you guys add crowds and all of that to these scenarios so people can kind of feel that. What that would
be. We're at the stage now where we can show you what it's going to feel like with a crowd around you. We're working with people at the moment on crowd modeling and showing exactly what the crowd movement will be like, but we're not quite there yet. That's quite so cool. Some quite complex technology. But that's certainly where we're going. So you can see not what it looks like just as an empty venue, but what it's going to feel like as a crowd is in that space.
I love it. I don't want to take your entire day here, but I have a couple other questions because you speak about, I'm shifting gears a little bit here, but you speak a bit about event burnout. And I think there's some important points you make for leadership in events, especially with your behind the stage program. And I'd like to ask a little bit about that. But before I get it specifically, can you tell me a little bit about behind the stage?
Yeah, look, behind the stage, we launched in mid-January, and it is an online training program. So we've got one course at the moment and a few resources, which is our courses Master Event Scheduling in a Weekend. We're currently working on the next course, but it's focused around building leadership in events. So anybody can write a technical schedule and call it done, right? Mm-hmm. But I have for a long time believed that leadership comes through paperwork and leadership comes through many avenues, and it's not just the person and their presence on site, but it's how you set up in the months leading into an event, how you set your team up, and how you make yourself replaceable at the event. Because I believe if you need to be at the event for the event to be delivered, I think you've failed as a leader. because, I've had many experiences throughout my career where things have happened and I haven't been able to be present at the event in the capacity I thought I was going to be. I've been in a control room trying to sort situations out, and my team have had to deliver the event without me there. So that really is the focus of what we're building, is being able to build leadership and build processes and systems that help people deliver events that then in turn reduce burnout and stress, because everybody has a better experience when it's properly planned and delivered. So, we also do on-site training, especially in Australia, but, we can talk about if people want it internationally. So teams of people like municipalities and government teams, especially, we do a lot of work with those organisations, and just building those systems and processes and leadership principles within those organisations. And it kind of feeds a lot hand in hand what we're doing with the Imagination Collaborative, because in a funny sort of way, being able to build your event and stress test it ahead of time also reduces a lot of burnout and stress on the ground, because now all of a sudden you're not dealing with those issues of having to move stages, or, oh, I didn't realise this has come up, quick, let's go and address that. You've done that in the months before. So, yeah.
I love that. I think that, I really care about our team and what we do. And production in general is a very challenging industry, because it works in waves, in that either is every event that you do on a tour or a one-off event. There's production that, planning that leads up to it. And then events themselves can be quite the time suck, where you're on site for a lot of that time. And then we go on to the next one. And it can create this culture of burnout. And so I think there is a better way. And I'm glad that you're one of the leaders that are currently trying to address this in an actionable way. And so, I was going to ask you, how can we create more sustainable company culture as event leaders? But I believe your answer is what you just said. You need to create systems that allow you to delegate and pull yourself out of having to be on everything, and empower people to do their job, but also the pre-planning part, plan out a lot of the drama, the stuff that doesn't have to be dramatic. Make sure that it's not dramatic. Everything doesn't have to be an emergency.
Well, yeah, I'm a huge fan of military principles, Seth, and I've pulled a lot of what I've done over the years from the Navy SEALs. I think is a great example of how to prepare people properly for environments that you just cannot predict. And I'm not going to ever liken events to war zones, but they are both environments you just can't predict at times. And, events have, even if you're doing corporate events and you've got 200 people there's 200 variables that you just can't predict how they're going to respond on the day to different situations, no matter how much experience you have or how hard you try. And, some of the events I did, 80, 100, 200,000 people that we've done. And those, just magnifies, doesn't it? So if you have principles that don't plan for specific situations, but they empower people to respond to situations, and they train them of how to respond to those situations. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You've set your team up right, and if you set your team up right, it's not going to be as stressful. There's going to be less burnout, less on the day firefighting and chaos, because everybody has a clear operating plan and a clear set of procedures and principles that they work to and they understand, that has been established well ahead of the event. So they know what decisions they can make and what decisions they need to escalate. Simple.
Yes, you're empowering them, giving them the tools they need to do their job, and a framework to work within. I love that. And I'm going to check out your behind the stage information and programs, because I am always looking for tools to help, help in training, either for myself or for others that need it in our company. And one thing that we, since 2020, there's just like this gap of, there's early people in the industry, and then there's later people, but it's like a whole group left in that. I don't know if you're experiencing this where
Did you
you are,
see
but
my LinkedIn post yesterday?
I didn't know. Is this what you talked about?
Yeah. So it's I call it the Great Talent Exodus. It's
Yes.
yeah, it's 6 years on from LinkedIn, sorry, from COVID. But
Mm-hmm.
in that COVID period, I mean, we had a whole heap of people that worked for us that left and never came back. And they said, Ian, look, I'm really sorry, but I had to feed the family. I've gone and got a council job, or I've got I'm working at a freight depot, and I start work at 7 a.m. and I'm home to pick the kids up at 3 p.m, and I do their homework with them. And do you know what? I don't work weekends. And when I'm at home, I forget work even exists. It's just somewhere I go for 8 hours a day, and that's it. And
Right.
I'm just not coming back to events. And they were some of our best people that worked with me for over 20 years and had just disappeared. And how do you take 20 years worth of knowledge and experience and replace that within 4 years? It's 4 years now post COVID. You just can't. And that gap, that talent exodus happened all around the world. And I think the industry is only just starting to really get back on its feet and get some people, filling those gaps that have some experience, but they don't have that 20 years experience. And there's people like you and I and many people that weathered the storm and were like, oh, I'd love to do something else, but this industry just keeps dragging me back. And here we are.
It does.
But,
doesn't it?
you're right. There's that gap in the middle of people that just aren't there anymore. And I think post-COVID, the industry and the expectations of the people that are coming to work within the industry now are very different. And that was people that were already in the industry that realised there's something outside. I've just sat at home for 12 months, 18 months, however long you were locked down without events. Or there's the people that have never worked in events that are young, that are coming up, that are going, I'm just not going to work 18, 20 hours a day every day. That's just not how I'm choosing to live my life. So the industry has to change. It has to adapt. It has to progress. And we want to be called an industry. We have to act like an industry. Gone are the days of rock and roll, or the show's got to go on. The show goes on every single day, thousands and tens of thousands of times every day around the world. We now have this responsibility to treat this as an industry and not as just a one-off, like when I started in the 80s. I could count on one hand the number of big shows that happened in any, one period of time. Now that's every day, right? The size has grown, but our philosophies and our principles haven't developed enough with the development of the scale of the industry as it is today.
Yes, and you and I both have watched the professionalization of, especially technicians within the industry, and I do remember that it was more rock and roll early on, and now it's more almost IT technician, on site now, that are very professional, and they expect to be treated like any other IT profession out there. And so I think that what you're providing with Behind the Stage is a path for industry leaders to start connecting their staff with and train, and themselves giving tools to create an environment or a company culture, if you will, that is more conducive to that lifestyle, to having, it's lifestyle first, which brings me full circle back to when you started your first company. It was lifestyle first. So you were,
it still is today, Seth. It's funny. You've caught me at home. We got home, Wednesday? We got home on Sunday and we're off again in 2 weeks. We're very rarely here. It's still to this day. I live my life. We work hard and we have a balance of work life that a lot of people with 9-to-5 jobs would look at and go, "You're crazy. You work on the weekends." But I'd take time off during the week when I feel like it and I need to. So it really is. It's a work-life balance thing that works for me. But I still live my life to have a good lifestyle as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And you've carried that philosophy forward. Ian, I really appreciate you taking the time. I feel honored that you spent time with us. You have so much experience. I think you and I could probably talk all day. But thank you for stopping by on the Event Pro Show and sharing a little bit about what you're doing with the Imagination Collaborative and Behind the Stage. If people want to learn more about you and the Imagination Collaborative, what should they do?
They can go to theimaginationcollaborative.com or, I was going to say all one word. Of course, it's one word. Or behindthestage.global. Or look me up on LinkedIn. It's Ian Morrison. And, I'd love to connect and hear more about people's stories.
Well, thank you so much. And it's been great talking to you and getting to know you a little more.
Thank you so much for having me on, Seth. Like you say, I've really enjoyed this conversation and could chat all day.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us on another episode of the Event Pro Show. If you want to hear our backlog of episodes, go to theeventproshow.com, where I am either introducing you to another wonderful person in event production like Ian, or I'm sharing with you a little bit deeper dive tips on audio visual production within a corporate environment. But either way, thank you for sharing a little bit of your time with us today, and we'll see you on the next one. The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.